I think most of you know who we are, but we have a relatively new faculty member. So we're going to just do a quick introduction. I'm Ron Tully, Dean for Arts, Humanities, Social Sciences.
And nobody knows me. I'm Mark Kernach. I work in the physical therapy department.
And so the reason why Mark and I are leading this team is we're both the, I think, the only two institutional HLC peer reviewers on campus. So if you're interested in becoming a peer reviewer, talk to me. It's fascinating work.
Don't talk with me.
So we do accreditation in ways that we don't think about, right? It goes beyond simply the formal professional organizations many of us have in our fields. It's built into the health professions and pharmacy and sciences. It's built into the College of Business. There are many areas that have formal professional accrediting bodies, but we all do it. The Department of Education, ODHE, HLC for all institutions. Any institution that's worth its weight is going to have an accrediting body. I'm not going to go over all these bullet points because this was in the slides. These were the slides that I did with the overall oral presentation. But some things that you want to think about is the visit is based on the information we give. So yes, we have one person, Sarah Hameson, who writes the narrative, but it's based upon all the evidence that you gave. So when folks ask you questions, they're asking questions about the evidence itself. That's where the narrative comes from. So it's important to think about this process is based upon that. If you didn't know who the Higher Learning Commission is, it is the largest university accrediting body in the United States, geographically speaking. The only one that's even close is Sachs, which is in the South. You don't really need to know that. But if you were curious, all of these states listed up here are also under its umbrella, and it's rumored to be expanding soon as well. So why do we do this? We do this for many reasons. We do it because we want to distribute federal financial aid. We can't do it without that. We do it because we want to. We want peers to look at the quality of our program, measure it against other programs at other institutions. Again, all the peer reviewers come from peer institutions. They're folks just like Mark and myself, administrators, faculty, staff at all levels. So it's a reciprocal relationship. Obviously, it's required for many certification exams. We know that. It really helps employers determine the validity of the degree. You know this when you talk to your students, when you talk to your kids about going to a school, you wouldn't look at a school that wasn't accredited by some umbrella group because you know that the degree, you can't account for that peer evaluation factor. You can't account for a professional organization that's kind of monitoring the quality of those programs. So this is the value of accreditation. Today, we're going to talk about two criterion. The first is mission. And we all know that mission statement. What's the mission statement? This is also part of what? It's part of our operational Big 8. So how many of you here can tell me the Big 8? Raise your hands if you remember the Big 8. One person? Some of the Big 8? Shocker. How many of you have been here more than 5 years? Okay, so the Big 8 is operational, right? It's what we do. What are some of the things we do?
Excellence in teaching.
Excellence in teaching, right? What else?
Heartland values.
Heartland values. There's a demographic cliff coming. What are we focused on?
Simplicity.
Growth and enrollment, diversity in all of its definitions, right? Okay. So the operational Big 8, if you don't remember those, and even if you're new, you're supposed to know those because those are operational. Walk through Old Main. Look, they're on the slides. They're on the slides that I presented, but they're also going to be back up on these slides in a few. Think about operationally what we do, and those will come to mind. They're all the big things. Quality teaching, emphasizing diversity, growing enrollment. These are things that we operationalize. So again, here's the list. I'll leave it up there for a little bit. All things we talked about. Develop the whole person, provide experiential learning.
How many people know when the Big 8 went into effect? 2012. So this is a 10-year reaffirmation. So literally up until 2022, right, these were the strategic goals for the institution, so. Worth remembering.
And again, we don't think about them, and it's not necessarily a question a reviewer will ask, but it's a good possibility they might ask it. They're certainly going to ask about our current mission, which is this. Okay, this is our current strategic plan. Much simpler, much easier to remember. Most of us know it by those verbs, invite, engage, and inspire, but it would be helpful to know the full phrase as well. These are things that guide us, whether or not we, again, think about them all the time. They should be becoming gradually operationalized as well, because they drive the mission. Invite, engage, inspire. Every Oiler, every step of the way.
And as members of this community with this mission, as a reviewer, I would expect you could articulate it in some manner. You know, like the operational aid, like you should at least be able to bring those forth if there's a discussion going on. Or the new iteration of what those are, because that is what we do. That's who we are.
Yeah, and as a reviewer, I'd be less interested in the word for word robotic recitation of it and more of the idea. Your point about diversity as a core value. Those things should be in your brain as educators.
Yeah. And if you just had a discussion and brought up diversity, which is part of the big eight, great. I know that you know that, you're aware of it. And that's what a reviewer is looking for to validate what has been sent to me in this assurance argument.
Now, when you look at these, and again, these were in the presentation that was submitted to the entire campus, there's no real mysteries here. If you've been to any of the, particularly the Friday morning sessions, our introductory orientation sessions, and you've ever heard President Feld talk, you certainly remember principles that guide our work. That first thing. What are we grounded in? Christian faith welcomes all people or people from all different backgrounds, respect all varieties of faith while still keeping that core, right? It's something that she's mentioned many times, the idea of civility that we bring to campus. We merge the best of education in preparation for 21st century careers. And the big one here that stands out to me too is, again, that focus that we're all educators, whether we're staff or faculty, we are all teachers. Why does it exist? It exists so that we can perpetuate that education for our future generations. And again, you see kind of a repetition of those ideas under principles that guide our work. Diversity initiatives, these are some examples of the evidence put forth. Certainly LGBT initiatives would be part of this. Anything cultural could be part of this. These are just some examples that you might be asked for. And again, you're bringing your perspective on this. Okay, so how do we value diversity? Well, how do you value it? What committees do you serve on? What service do you provide to the community? Where is that evidence? Was that evidence submitted? I think of like something like the Campus Pride Index, for example. That would be a good example of specific statistical evidence that indicates kind of a barometer of where we are. Service ambassadors, orientation projects, all these again are listed. There are many, many more pieces of evidence that were submitted. General education, we just revisited the core about 5 years ago, redid that whole thing. What's the relationship to the world? How do we measure these outcomes? And how do we serve the public good? These are kind of our outwardly facing bits of evidence. Some of those are Healthy Kids Day, Healthy Fair, Orientation Service, COE Club, you see a lot of those there. Again, this is a truncated list. It depends on your direct reports or you yourself, what was submitted as evidence. But any of these can serve as that evidence. And again, you don't have to rattle off a laundry list of them as long as you have some ideas of how this is executed. How do we serve the public good? Well, let me tell you from Deborah, from pharmacy's perspective, here's what we do for the public good. Those are the kind of targeted questions that peer reviewers would ask.
If you've participated in the orientation day service project, yeah, see, there's an easy one for all of you.
I think it helps me when I participate either as a person being reviewed or as a reviewer, that to think about these things and understand how I personally do this in the classroom with my students in my job. Because then it just gives me a better framework when I'm in a group with a reviewer asking these questions that I could share that is how I do. Because I agree, learning the list can be challenging. And again, if I'm a reviewer and asking you, and you give me a list, I'm like, okay, you know the list. How do you actually operationalize that in your classroom or in your department? And that just comes from, I think, your self-reflection and pointing out, okay, this is what I do. Because I don't think, my read of this argument, there's nothing in here that should be shocking. It's just getting on the same page and understanding how we reflect the mission of the university.
Yeah, initially, I think in some of the sessions, there's a tension because people want to think about the right answer. But once one or two people open up and provide evidence, and everybody wants to submit that evidence, I'm thinking, again, serving the public good. This leads into criterion 3 and 4 and 5. It's not that it's isolated in this. And you can think of anything we provide, from the free contemporary Christian lecture series to the Donnell series concerts we do, to athletics. All that is serving the public good. Do people come and use our spaces? Do they get some benefit out of that? Yes, then you're serving the public good. So it can be all of those things. So how do we prove to a peer reviewer that we operate in an ethical, responsible way? Well, we do this mostly by our policy exhibits, right? So we have handbooks, of course, that's the base of everything. We go back to the faculty manual, we go back to see shared governance. How do we execute shared governance? Well, we have the clear, concrete records of just minutes and agenda, but how does that become operational as well? So we have measures to look at those things. Here are some things that we could look at for policies. And again, this is a very truncated list: academic integrity, copyright, information literacy, conflict of interest policies, board trustees code of regulations. All of these are possible. You could probably think of 50 more that you could add to this list, but any policy shows an external accrediting body how we operate. So when we look at specifics of this, we can read the policy and say, okay, well, that's one thing, but prove that you actually do it. Well, that's when we dive into the minutes. That's when we look at changes with shared governance. That's when we look at how it becomes operational and isn't just a static document. Did you want to add to that, Mark?
Well, it's also our responsibility as employees to understand what's in the employee handbook. We read it, we sign off on it, right? That we've read it. Same with the faculty handbook. It is my responsibility as a faculty member to understand that document and what is in it. So I would expect you to know that as a reviewer, I would expect you to know those. Like, not the detail or know verbatim, but understand what's located in it. And that's where we go for that information.
We also do it through our boards. IRB, ICOOK, obviously for human subjects and animal subjects. Cost to attend, the calculator that we put out on the website that allows students to get a fairly transparent and accurate idea of what they will pay when they come here. And then, as I mentioned earlier, these community offerings that we can use for criterion 1, we can also use for criterion 2. These are just some, a very, again, truncated list of the things that we offer to the community, most of which are free of charge. If they enrich the community culturally, if they enrich it through diverse options, if they enrich it through being open to everyone. And it doesn't have to necessarily be free too. I mean, it could be at cost. We're still providing or eating most of the indirect costs of those events. So we're not looking at necessarily cost. We're just looking at what are the types of things that we offer. And again, all of those fall under that umbrella. So let's get to some questions. And did you want to just treat this as kind of like a mock peer review?
But real quickly, before we do that, because criterion 2, there's a smattering of sort of our main policy manuals there. But I'm looking around the room mostly at some of the administrative folks. So how many of you that are in administrative offices that interact with students have a set of procedures, policies, and guidelines for interacting with students in the way in which you do so? Just raise your hand. Yeah, okay. So just keep in mind, that's essentially what this is. So if there's a formal complaint, a student files a formal complaint, there's a process for that. A student has a problem with a roommate, there's a process and policies for that. Student cheats, there's a committee, right? Just remember those things in your role, that this is the work you do, and there's integrity to it because we have policies and procedures for that. The vast majority of those things come out of the catalogs, right? And the student rights and regulations that are in the catalogs. And then, of course, the employee manuals, the faculty manual, those sorts of things. That's where they derive from, but you practice that every day. You know, so those of you that sit in those situations, those are the kinds of things, if you're asked, when Mark says, speak to it from what you actually do, just recognize that you don't make that stuff up, right? You know, there's a way that you look at a situation like that, and that's the important thing to reference if you're asked about it. But yeah, so we thought that it might be good to just have a little interaction here along the lines of the kinds of questions that site reviewers might ask, having read the assurance argument. So we had a couple of site reviewers read the assurance argument and, you know, think about what questions might I ask in that context. This may or may not be at all what the team asks you about, but it's the kind of questions that our assurance argument might be.
Well, I just want to state too, that in my experience, mission, the first criteria goes pretty well. I mean, because it's kind of, mission statements aren't that restrictive, and I think they could be applicable in a lot of situations. The integrity and criteria too, I do think just a lot of self-reflection and maybe discussions within your departments of, you know, well, have we had students with these complaints or this issue? And so that you can share that as evidence that this is how we practice.
All of this is focused on how we deal with students, which is not academic.
No, it's everything we do.
Everything, yeah.
Everything we do.
Like, what if your colleague harassed you? What do you do with that? Like, how do you respond to that situation? How do you deal with that situation? And that would be in our employee handbook, right? And how to deal with harassment from colleagues.
So when the peer reviewers are in the room with you all, it's going to be very much methodical approach. They're just going to ask for confirmation of evidence, and they're going to hop around because they're going to know there are folks in the room. Like, they're going to figure out Kristen probably does something with assessment, and I saw Damon does something with online. They're going to figure out who those point people are because they're going to be answering the questions multiple times. And like, they'll stop and say, well, we've heard enough from you. Let's hear from some other folks. So to spread the wealth around, and that goes back again to the evidence. How do you use evidence? What's your evidence? Even if it wasn't necessarily submitted, the verbal verification of what was submitted is part of it, but part of it is hearing something new, right? The testimony has to gel with the entire argument. What was submitted in totality as evidence has to seem like it's simpatico on some level with the verbal testimony.
So question that if we say something that wasn't in the argument, that's a good thing?
It could be. I mean,
You know, I mean,
well, let's put it this way, and maybe you can go a little bit deeper in with that question. I don't know. Did I cut you off?
no, yeah.
What I was thinking with that is, there's nothing they haven't seen before, and it's not a gotcha event. These are your peers, so they're just looking to confirm the evidence. But it's also not a forum, and Mark, you can probably speak to this as well. Honestly, as a reviewer, I don't care if you're there to tell me some gotcha thing about the institution. I'm not there for any of that. So if it was something bad or positive, I'm going to make note of it. But it's not going to necessarily affect the review.
So I think what you asked earlier about like the policies and procedures. So like, I don't remember seeing anything in the argument that like was specifically about the compassionate withdrawal policy and how we go through that. So if they're asking about, you know, our way to treat policy and things, and I mentioned that.
Absolutely.
About it. Like, is that
Yes,
good?
it's unique, specific evidence.
Yeah. And then might result in the team saying, hey, could you send us to Sarah Hinkson, they'll send a note saying, hey, we'd like to see that compassion withdrawal form. And then Sarah will reach out and say, give me the compassion withdrawal form, and she'll put it in the assurance argument.
Yeah, the assurance argument is the argument to the Higher Learning Commission to continue our accreditation, saying that we do fulfill these criteria. It's not all exhaustive of everything that we do. So only certain pieces of information are given so that they get the idea, okay, you do comply. So anything that's, brought forth, and they usually are discussions, just like this. They ask people questions or, tell me how, do you have a compassion withdrawal? Can you tell me about that? And that would be perfectly fine. They are not, and I don't know if, they're not complaint sessions, because I'm only here to verify the argument. I'm not your advocate for change. I just have to verify the argument. And if you do start and go off on a tangent, which I'm not clear about, then I just either ask you, anybody else have something to add? Because, I don't want it to be
Yeah.
derailed. I only have so much time. And I'm here to verify this, not to change things.
And if it's something exceptional, like what you just said, that you feel is a particularly unique program to the University of Findlay, then I might go back when I'm drafting the report, and I might ask somebody, hey, can I see documentation to that
Yeah,
effect, just so I can corroborate?
Keep in
And-
mind, the committee, the site team can, in addition to recommending. Improvement, areas for improvement or concern, they can also highlight things that they think.
Yeah.
We do well, so.
And also, if you bring this up and it's not in the insurance argument, that's great. But I'm also going to ask another group, do you have any type of policies that address when students need to take a withdrawal for personal reasons? Because it's not just one person. I typically ask the question repeatedly to make sure this is something institutionally done. And not just something about and nobody else is working.
A quick question. So can you maybe set the stage, like how, and I apologize, and this is somewhere in all of our information, but with these peer reviews, who's participating? How do we know? How large are they?
It was in the slides, so the people who are your peer reviewers, I specifically named them in the slide, so if you have a chance, watch it. It's actually.
It's at the end of this too.
Oh, it's in this one too, okay. It lists all their names and titles, and you can Google them, they're all real people, from, yeah. I didn't want to put more information in that, but you can see their pictures online, none of it's private information, and they're listed in the directory of HLC peer reviewers.
No, I saw that. I mean, as far as like participation, not who's coming.
Oh,
from
yeah, okay, I
I'm
wasn't
sorry,
clear on the
because I'm
question.
Like, I'm hoping some of that, no, as far as who from the university would
Yeah.
participate with those peer reviewers.
So it's kind of like we see today, it's a mix of folks at all levels of institutional leadership, and students. The peer review team meets with the board of trustees, usually in a separate meeting, that's a closed meeting, so the board can be candid. And usually with upper administration, there's a meeting with just faculty. And then there's a meeting, sometimes a smaller meeting with students, depending upon the size of the institution. And that's my experience.
Same here.
Gels, yeah.
And then they will have, open sessions around these criteria, which is sort of a mixed audience.
You typically, you want the direct reports for areas in the room for those events. And if others can come, great. I mean, I told my college at the last college meeting, you should be prepared on that Monday that this takes priority. So whatever else you have going, figure out something for your classes, and this should take priority.
Yeah, definitely if you're the chair of a program or a chair of a committee.
Yeah.
You should be there.
So we touched upon an issue with the units. So figure out something for your classes. But online. But they call specific people that short fellow comes to.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear a question.
Do they ask for specific people, specific faculty to report this?
Who? Us?
Does the
Or
committee
visitors?
ask? No, I'm talking to the chair of faculty.
Yeah.
Specifically, chair.
Yes.
But I have never.
I've
on
never
any
called a specific
visits.
faculty member.
Yeah, I've never called anyone specifically up, and no one in the team I work with has.
State class is available. Right?
Yes.
100 weeks for you.
And, if you can go, again, anybody that's in a director's position should probably consider themselves available that day. Chairs should consider themselves available, deans, et cetera.
So regular faculty is safe to go live.
Yeah, the site team will share a final schedule.
Yep.
For the visit beforehand. So
1 week.
it's already tentatively built, but it will change before it actually happens. So once those open sessions are known, we'll let the campus know about those. And that would be the occasion where, you know, if you're a faculty member or a staff person, you know, that isn't participating in some other meeting with them, that's an opportunity for you to participate. It's an open invitation. But I think what Ron and Mark are saying is if you're a department chair or a chair of a committee or a division, a head of an area, those open sessions are probably sessions you should attend in addition to anyone that you might be asked to. If you're gonna be called into a specific meeting with the team members, you'll know that in advance.
Yeah.
Sarah Hinkson or I will reach out to you and say, hey, you need to be at this place at this time to meet with the HLC person, so. And you won't meet with the whole team, you'll probably meet with one individual or maybe two.
Did you want to try to do the mock thing? Let's take one more question and then try to do the mock thing, Robert.
Yeah, so you may have already addressed this, I apologize. I assume that the team takes a more holistic approach to the responses that they receive. What I mean by that is, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that if a faculty member or one individual says something about the policies, specific policies to the question, and then in another context, somebody else says something different and would happen to misspeak, they would probably take a holistic approach to the sort of overall responses. I guess my question is how much angst should I have about saying something stupid, and because I've been going to do this?
You've never done that.
I think you answered your own
Yeah,
question.
well, it gets back to, yeah, you say something,
I asked my own question, not talk.
no, please talk. But if somebody says something, you know, and then you say something that's kind of like, that's not right. Well, I already asked two other people, so then I might think, is that man stupid?
Right.
Okay. But you're not, and I'm sure you'll do great.
Yeah, holistically, you're gonna take the totality of the responses and kind of review them. I mean, if you wanna, this is probably a poor metaphor because I don't wanna think of anything as a Titanic and an iceberg, but the process is really like an iceberg because the majority of it takes place before we get on campus.
Oh, yeah.
We spend weeks reviewing that insurance argument. We have multiple meetings with the team. So by the time you get to campus, all the evidence that we need has been solicited. And the institution has presumably responded in kind with that evidence. So when we get there, again, just to reiterate, we are just taking that verbal testimony to kind of corroborate what we already know from the assurance argument.
And they are already sending requests for additional information to us, you know, so. So that's absolutely, they will know that assurance argument and the evidence better than any of you.
Yeah, and I typically write out my questions, like if I usually do criteria 3 and 4, and so I have all those questions and I know who I want to speak to when I get there, so I already come with that information available.
And that's why we won't have that final schedule until closer to the visit, right?
Yeah, because you review the argument, and then if you have additional questions, or you want clarification, or just, I'm more interested in looking at like the assessment piece, so I want to talk to the assessment committee as well. Yeah, because that's my choice.
But yeah, let's
get to a few questions. I think we'll skip over the first two because we've talked quite a bit about this, but I'd like somebody to describe to me how you'd react if you witnessed or were a victim of harassment on campus. What do you do? Yes, tell me your name and title, please.
Dr. Kim Litchfeld, if I was harassed on campus, I would go to my Title IX office. Title IX office, please.
And how do you know that, Dr. Litchfield?
Because we are trained every year, and so the Title IX office comes and it's Charles Ludwig, and he comes to different departments and puts on presentations.
Who's Charles Ludwig?
He is our Title IX preparator.
Okay. How else do you disseminate that evidence?
There is information that's sent online through trainings. We have online trainings that happen in the spring. And then there are just presentations and certificates that we can actually go and take during the school year.
Thank you. Someone else. So if you didn't go to the Title IX officer, how might you report that?
I go to my supervisors.
Okay,
You not mention names and then just say what's happening. Then walk the line. Is it accepted or no?
I'm here to collect evidence. I'm not here to judge. Yes. Tell me your name and your position.
I'm Sherry Hammond, Director of Housing and Residence Life, and there's a place online where you can report things as well. If you can't get straight to Charles or schedule a meeting right away with him.
Jonathan?
I was gonna mention the sign that this material is mentioned.
This year.
You can also call the hotline as well and leave your information in there. Depending on who it is, if they're an employee of the university, you can put it to human resources or you got campus security to fill out the report. Stress faculty, remember?
Any other responses?
I was just gonna say human resources.
We're all responsible reporters.
If you see something,
Say something.
Title IX covers everybody on the campus community, not just students. It's a common misconception, so. Okay,
Yeah, that's why first of all, as a reviewer, I would expect everybody to know you have a Title IX office, so that's just a given. And so again, reflecting, looking over these things, making sure you remember the things we get trained on or asked to be trained on is a good way of preparing yourself, just so you're aware of it.
Title IX, okay.
but we're asking the questions here.
I'm concerned. Okay. My mind is at rest. I know we have Title IX since 1972 and this and that. But approaching HR is not no longer the route, which is Title IX and approach HR.
Well, I would just be collecting evidence. I would not be answering those questions. So again, you can ask some of the folks from the Title IX office about that, and I could actually answer that, but not in this role. And if you ask me that, I'm just kind of prepping you for it. If you ask me that question, I'm just here to collect evidence. So that's an important distinction. Let's go to the next question. The last one.
Okay, please share with us some examples of the exercise of academic freedom here at the university.
Yes, sir. Tell me your name and title.
My name is Bush and I work at research marketing. What I see in terms of the make our own syllabus. That's a yeah. As long as we cover the material, we have the liberty of delivering the material in a variety of ways of our choosing. That's academic freedom. And I have not faced any deal 17 years on the way I teach. How I teach. Believe that is it.
This syllabus you mentioned, is there a syllabus template on campus? Can you tell me about that?
There is in the public business and university as a template. But you are not restricted to the template. You can add to the thing. You have to fulfill the requirements of the template. You can add. Therefore, there is respect.
Okay, other examples may go beyond the syllabus of academic freedom. Yes.
Kim Littrell. We're able to also pick the books that we would like to use in our classrooms, and I think it's really nice. So as new texts come out, or as texts, multiple texts are present, that could help with delivering the information. I think it's really nice if we're able to choose those texts by to our students, whether they're in like hard copy or online. And that helps the students really learn as well and have kind of, I think, a better engagement.
Thank you. Anyone else? Who are you?
My name is Robert Foster, I'm in computer science. And I can speak for myself and also within my own department. Not only have faculty had a very wide research agenda, that introduces a number of different areas that have not been restricted in that. The university has also provided funds for us to be able to do that through, for example, professional development funds. I think that really even more so speaks to academic freedom, not in the sense that we can do it, but the university supports that. As long as that research that is a clear research that has clear outcomes and is substantiated, do not question the content.
How is that reviewed?
Review, it's a very thorough review, actually. So if I'm, for example, going to a conference, and I'm going to be presenting a research at that conference, I would submit that proposal with what the research is, what the cost of the conference, what's going on with it, to the professional development committee. That's reviewed by the professional development committee, which is made up of faculty members, one from each college of the university, and then the determination is made whether or not to fund it. Every professional development proposal I ever put in, I've done a number of years, has been.
Maybe one more response? Yes, tell me your name, position.
David Jessica, Chair of the Department of Communication, in terms of academic freedom, faculty members are able to design and develop our curriculum in a way that maintains up-to-date advancements in each of our fields. That process is reviewed and controlled by the faculty throughout the process as well, both starting within the department through the colleges and then to a level of committee work, either at the undergraduate or graduate level.
Thank you.
I thought that was great. And I think, just by hearing your responses, we're reflecting on, yeah, that is true. That is what we do. I think in a review, you're just asking a question up the bat and you've never thought of it before, you might have a hard time or stumble through, what am I doing? But if you think about that, or coming to this meeting and think, okay, yeah, those are great ways of answering or reflecting how we should have academic freedom here at the university. How we deal with situations of harassment.
And you will find, well, in fact, Dr. Goch, back to your question about, the subjectivity of a response. Like I can't and won't respond to that, but I will help lead. If you start at, if I ask a question, and I'm not getting a response, I'm like, well, do you have X or do you do this? And that will usually loosen up the audience a bit to answer those questions. Let's go into another question here. Tell me about your plagiarism policy. How do you deal with plagiarism at UF? Sorry, you've answered a question,
Yeah.
sir. I need a response from someone else. Somebody new.
Speak up.
Yes.
Anthony Sinisha, registrar, and so my office is kind of central in the reporting and communication process with students who completely have committed some form of academic integrity violations, and so there's a policy on academic integrity in the catalog. Describes the different types of violations, and when a faculty member discovers a violation, then they communicate and have a conversation with a college representative who is also familiar with the policies. They work together to determine what level the violation is and what would be the appropriate consequence, and then they reach out to the student to have a meeting to discuss that. And after the meeting, then they submit the academic integrity form to my office. Every given day, we reach out to the student, let them know that charges been officially made and that they have the right to appeal that. I also sit on the academic standards committee, and that committee is responsible for any appeals that the student. That committee has the final say if the student chooses to.
Who sits on that committee? How's that formed?
That committee is made up of representatives from each of the colleges. So those college reps that I mentioned at the beginning, that committee basically consists of those college representatives. Then individual faculty can go to discuss. Each of the 6 colleges represent the committee.
I'm going to ask a question that goes off of this list here. Do you guys have a policy for use of AI? I don't know. It seems like a lot of people might use AI for nefarious means. So, yes, tell me your name and position.
You were looking at me, so I figured I should answer. Review Overton team for the College of Business. We do not have an AI policy, however, we do have guidelines for artificial intelligence.
Could you or someone else maybe tell me the difference between guidelines and a policy? Just explain how that work that out.
Okay, I guess so I would define policy as something that we need to abide by. Guidelines are more so suggestions for standards and things that we should, suggestions for things that we can.
Yes.
I could add to the need for why we have guidelines, not a policy. AI is an evolving thing at the moment, so developing a strict policy to adhere to might not align with where AI is at the moment. I have guidelines that we can use to help teach our students how to best incorporate the use of AI into their coursework to be able to better prepare them for their use in their lives.
I was looking at you because you bring something in.
Well, that was a good question, Mr. Chu, I don't know, reading the audience, there was a little bit of, I don't know.
Yeah.
From Sean.
Yeah.
I think that's a good response, and we all understand.
Which again, for a peer review, would not be like a moment, it would be to dig deeper, and there's an answer there, maybe people are a little gun shy, maybe they legitimately don't know. And that's more questions that we can ask after the session. Looking at this last bullet point, I'm gonna deviate a bit from this, because this is a question that's commonly asked. Actually, the disclosure of conflict of interest is a common question for a lot of campuses. But I'm more interested in your reactions with the board. How do you interact with the board? How does faculty interact with the board? How does staff interact with the board? What are some common venues for this to take place? Do you know your board members?
Scott Freed for College of Business faculty. Each of the committees of the Board of Trustees has faculty representation, which is voted on by the faculty to seat one person, not as a member of that committee, but as a voice on that committee for the faculty. We also have students who are represented on each of the boards, voted on by our student body.
Want to add to that? That's helpful, thank you. Does anyone in this room serve on a committee that reports to the board? Yes, sir. Tell me your name.
Todd Light, School of Justice Sciences. I'm on the Student Services Committee as a faculty representative to the Board of Trustees. And we are regularly asked to provide a report to the Board of Trustees at each meeting. And then after the Board of Trustees meets, we then give out a report of what happened at the Board of Trustees to our faculty senate. So it goes into the official record.
How often do those meetings take place?
3 times a year.
And where would I find minutes? Could I find minutes online? If I was a faculty member and I want to read those, where would I go for that?
I would assume it would be to where we keep all the committee repository, but I don't, Board of Trustees, I'm not sure.
How about some staff folks? What are your interactions with the board? Remember, no judgment of the answer here. It's just a direct question.
Yansa is Vice President for Enrollment. Within enrollment, we have, when the board comes 3 times a year, it's typically our Vice President. I attend to present, and then if we need anyone else to present within directors of our committee, we have them as well.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Well, I wanted to add something, faculty interaction, if I could. On a rather regular basis, teams are invited to the Board of Trustees meetings and give updates on what's going on in their departments, not just on curriculum matters, but some of the research that's going on, promotions, which as somebody who sits at the board meetings, I can tell that the trustees find that to be really valuable. It gets to the heart of overall.
And where are you on campus? Yeah, what's your position?
Oh, Chamber Library.
I've never been on this campus. Where's the Chamber Library?
I'm the vice president of IT.
Yeah, the peer review team, that's a great behavior, like who you are, and what's your position, because as a reviewer, I don't know. You know, who you are, and that just gives me a frame of reference. And I think those responses were great in showing how, if you have that type of knowledge, like show up for these open sessions. Because we need you to, you know, speak to that criteria, in the manner that you did.
Right, and I'm thinking about the last question too. Some people are like, uh-oh, well, I don't have any interaction with the board. That's okay. Not everybody has it. That's not uncommon. It's not an uncommon reaction that people kind of pull back. It's not every day they're on campus. It's not every day that they're seen, but we're looking for pinpoints. Todd, you give a good example for pinpoint the committees, how often they meet. Scott, you elaborated on that process. That's helpful. So not everybody has to have that answer. If you don't know, you can just say, I don't know.
Yeah, I
That's
like
an
that
acceptable
honesty.
answer.
That was very good.
Yeah.
You don't have to know everything. That honesty is always the best.
So we do have time to do more questions for you all asked of us, but this is the list. Again, this was in the presentation that was submitted earlier. These are the folks that are coming to campus. Again, their information's online. I don't know any of them personally, and the federal compliance reviewer is a separate process, so that person will not be on campus. But the top 5 folks there, those are the folks that will be on campus. Again, this is in the other set of slides too, so if you'd like to look them up and see who they are, those are they. Questions for us?
As usual. Conflict of interest.
Yes.
And then you cannot go to a board of trustees meeting. You're not invited, but you may interact with the board of trustees, maybe even on campus. I really do not know if there are cases of. My RS 990 provides some declarations, right? Any board of trustees. Financial dealings, the university. Yeah. And most people will not acknowledge that they teach people. So maybe we don't bring that up. But that's one way, I mean, it tells us if there's a conflict. Interest is declared. It's public knowledge.
I understand that, but as a reviewer, I'm looking at this insurance argument and I'm trying to verify that the information that I was given is true. If I was not given the 1090s and all of that, then I would be thinking, is this your, why are you telling me this? Right, because I want to know, is that part of the insurance argument for the conflict of interest?
So limited to the assurance.
Well, yes, more or less, because I'm here as a reviewer to verify this information. Right, that's my job.
Well, in the 990s, deal specifically with income. There could be somebody who owns a contracting company or something, got a bid or something. It could be any of that. That happens quite frequently.
Yeah, and it's public knowledge, but there's also a process at the board level for declaring that conflict of interest. So, you know, it's documented, if that exists, it's documented, board members are made aware. Go ahead, Rose.
And I just want to point out the conflict of interest isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's more of a disclosure thing.
Yeah.
So that when conversations come up that could affect that, then they can excuse themselves from that conversation. So the conflict itself is
So I just want to close with these thoughts. And again, we still have time for questions. If you want to ask us questions, we run till 4. But it's very difficult, I think, for those of us that don't necessarily deal regularly with a professional organization that does accrediting for our discipline, to get in this concept of continuous improvement. It never stops. So I know I watch Kristen smile over there, right? This is the vein of assessment. We have to do more than simply comply. We have to do something with those changes. So it's not stopping of a process of continuation. Assuming we get a reaffirmation of our accreditation and, from my personal perspective, things look good, but I don't speak for the team that's reviewing us or anyone else, I just speak for myself. So assuming that happens, we know in 4 to 5 years, there's going to be another campus visit at that halfway point for a 10-year reaffirmation. It's a continuous process and it doesn't stop. So thinking again, talk with your chairs, your directors of your unit, what evidence was submitted, just kind of know on a superficial level at least. But as we said, there could be very clear anecdotal evidence of experiences. Again, you mentioned informal interactions with board members on campus. That's testimony, right? But you should understand, at least on a kind of surface level, what that evidence was if you weren't directly submitting it and someone in your department was. Just have kind of a knowledge of that. Kit, for example, you're chair of comm, so you should know all things comm. That's your end, that's your responsibility. You should be able to speak to that. It's your evidence. That's all we're here to find out. Corroborate what you submitted with your verbal testimony. It can't be any simpler than that. You know the evidence. So.
Yeah, in the physical therapy department, we reviewed the assurance argument and just pulled out the evidence that pertained to us. So that everyone in the department is aware that these reports that we generate or we use for our professional accrediting bodies, these were used as evidence. So now they're aware of that. Because if it comes up then in a meeting and they say we have this piece of evidence, then they are aware of that and they can speak to it.
This is why we provided all of you with that assurance argument. You can read it, and when you come across something that you're like, oh yeah, no, I know about that. That's the key thing, right? That's the piece you want to find out. There's a blue link, you probably clicked on it, it doesn't take you anywhere. That's the evidence is in the assurance portal, right? But that means there is evidence, something was submitted. So if you don't know what it is, talk to your supervisor, because Sarah Higginson reached out to someone and said, I need this, and got it. And then that way you'll know what it is, but that's a great approach. If you read through that argument, things that you recognize or that you know about, that's where you're on solid ground. If you didn't ever hear of this thing over here, don't worry about it.
Yeah, you don't have to know the whole thing. Just do know what you're supposed to. This is your report. You should know.
So we have a couple of minutes, so whatever questions that you have. Take a deep breath, it's okay, right? We're not here to request something.
So I have a general question. So this is the first time that HLC's been on campus. Are they gonna say as a group would be guided around, so we'll have an expectation of?
No.
The first time for you on campus?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Because they've been on campus.
Will they put up and have multiple
Yes.
sessions during the same
Yeah,
time?
they will generally work separately as.
They'll divvy up the responsibility. There will be probably 2 peer reviewers for each of the individual criterion sessions, sometimes 3. That's your experience as well, Mark. Yeah.
But frequently for example, you saw there's a provost, a counterpart to me on this team. More than likely, that will be the person I will meet with, maybe, so they will individually meet with different constituencies through the time that they're here. But yeah, the open sessions, they'll probably be, 2 at each or maybe 3.
How long do you find this to the last? You said they're cutting off or whatever, if there's a time constraint.
Yeah, it's about an hour.
It's an hour and I have to cut you off. If somebody's taking too much time, I do have to, because I'm a limited amount of time and I have to verify this information. So it's great when you're telling me something and then I need to verify, as conversations.
And I will say stop if somebody's already answered. I want a variety of answers.
Yeah, they do not. I never use listening to the same person. Again, these are our peers, and basically they're showing up to say, is this true when you submitted as evidence for this argument?
I would say, and again, Mark, you might be speedier at this than me, but I'd say the total hours these folks put in is at least 40.
Oh, yeah.
At least 40 hours. The compensation is $700. So no one's getting wealthy off of this. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. If they've done their homework well, they know exactly what they want to ask. They're going to ask about any perceived gaps, but they're also going to ask couched in that softball questions that we would know the answers to holistically. But again, there's no gotcha moment. It's just going off the evidence there, corroborating with verbal testimony.
I'm gonna ask Ron and Mark a question, since the pay is so extraordinarily good for doing this in comparison to the amount of time you put in. What do you get out of it as a process, as a reviewer?
I love it. Go ahead.
I get to go somewhere to see a new place, I like that, and I did learn a lot about assessment or criteria in higher education. I mean, I thought that was great, meet a lot of great people, learn how people do things, which is amazing. Sit there and go, wow, I wish I had that at my university. And so I enjoy it from a professional point of view, I find it interesting. Typically, you know, when we do prepare, we're only given a month, and I only prepare for 1 or 2 criteria, not all of them. So there's a lot of reading and going to your website. So I like it for that reason. And to go somewhere I've never been. Like,
Yeah, but not only this exotic place. It's looking at, why do I keep reading the north and winter? Now typically you go to campuses that are not unlike ours. There's a reason why this team was chosen. If you look where they are, their campuses are similar. So I'm going to similar campuses like these. I've been 10 states, so pretty much all over HLC's territory. And I would say the same thing. The pride that those people have in their institution resembles or reflects our pride in who we are and our identity, how excited they are to talk to people about it and brag about what they do. Yeah, there's a certain spy element to it. You're getting to see, you know, how somebody else is doing something, you know, which is very cool, and you bring those ideas back. Most of the time, the grass is not greener. No surprise, everybody in higher ed has the same problems. That's what they are: enrollment, budgets, all those issues are pretty much everywhere you go. How is the institution pivoting? How are they adjusting to deal with those challenges? That's what's exciting to me.
It is. So don't be afraid, you know, to be proud of what you do. I mean, folks here do great work. And, you know, in my experience, people come to work here every day with, you know, some effort to do something good. Be proud of that, because it will show in the context of it. The other thing is be truthful. Speak what you know, right? And what you are familiar with from the assurance argument. And, you know, beyond that, I really don't have any worries. They will find problems, right? We don't do everything fantastically. They will find areas, and that's okay. That's the purpose, part of the purpose of the visit. So.
And the one last kudos I would give, and I did this in the extended slides too, is just to Sarah Hinkson. Because I know, you know, she could be a bulldog about getting what she wants. She does it as a service. That is a very well-written assurance argument. I've read a lot of them. Thank you all for coming. Some of the initial part of this will be overlap, and then we will get into some Q&A. What I would ask of you in advance with the Q&A is to treat Mark and myself as HLC peer reviewers. We are not people you know. We are people that you never have seen, and we are going to ask you, when you raise your hand, to stand up, tell us who you are, and tell us all of your positions. So don't just say, I'm from the College of Health Professions. Tell me what your title is, and if you're a director, tell us that too, because they're not going to know who you are, so that will be part of the process. So just really quickly, I think all of you know who I am, but you might not know Mark.
I'm Mark Bernard. I'm a professor of physical therapy in the physical therapy department. I've been here for 1 year, so that's why you probably don't know who I am.
Okay. Yes, as far as I know, Mark and I are currently the only 2 HLC peer reviewers on UF's campus. So most of you have at least heard of HLC. If you've watched the slides, you got a little more information on it, and hopefully you didn't doze off. HLC is one of 7 accrediting bodies. It is a holistic accrediting body. So many of your professions, disciplines have individual professional organizations that you go through an accrediting process. This is holistic for the entire university. It is the largest geographic. If you were interested, you can look at those states and see where else it is. The only one that's comparable to it is SACS. That's the Southern Accrediting Commission that covers a bunch of South and Southeastern states. But as you notice, again, this is a reaffirmation. So this happens once every 10 years. There is a reaffirmation process that is usually in the 4th or 5th year, and we'll experience that too if everything goes well, which I'm hopeful it will. And this has been, we've been accredited since 1962. So why do we get accredited? Why is it important, and what is accreditation? Well, for many reasons we do this. The biggest reason is it signals to the world that we are serious. We're serious about our mission, we're serious about what we do, and we are good at it. We have credentialed folks in disciplines. We go through processes of, like this, peer review, so that we can take this process seriously. So like any other badging system, when someone sees HLC on the website, they understand immediately that that is an institution that has gone through a specific peer review process and has been vetted accordingly, and they have sort of a stamp of approval that tells the world that yes, that degree means something very particular. They are true specifically to their mission, which again is criterion 1. And again, these are just some more specific reasons of what the value is. I don't really need to explain the value at this point. We cannot give out financial aid. No one would probably take our institution seriously if we did not have accreditation. So that's the value of it. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to it, Mark.
Well, the HLC is the accrediting agency for the Department of Education, which requires it in order to receive federal aid. And I'm sure we depend on students' federal financial aid for our operations. So it is very important in that regard.
So you've seen these, if you looked at the vector training, this is not unfamiliar. These are examples of evidence that we have provided. So this is all in the assurance argument, which you can read online. Of course, you cannot click on each one of those individual links. Those are locked out, meaning they're in HLC systems, so that's done as kind of a preventative measure. But these are all things that you would see in any institution's body of evidence, and we have all of these. You recognize some of these because you probably submitted them. And it's a good point, and I'll say this multiple times during the presentation, is the process is really simple. Peer reviewers come to an institution, it's a team of 5, and what they do is they've spent, again, I used this analogy yesterday, and again, it doesn't mean any danger is involved in this, but it's kind of like an iceberg. The peer review process, the majority of it is underwater, you don't see it. That's when the peer reviewers off-site review the assurance argument. They go through each link, they click on it, they see if the evidence backs up what the statements say. So 90% of it is done off campus. Then when they get to the on-site, they've already done that vetting process. They've asked for more evidence and probably received more evidence. We're going through that process now. So when they get here, what they want is verbal testimony. They want verbal testimony that reconciles or corroborates what was given in the narrative and in the appendices for evidence. That's basically what it is. It's not a right or wrong answer, and you'll see in a moment when the questions are asked. I'm not going to be nodding my head in agreement. Mark and I will just be listening to what you say and taking notes. Again, so don't try to read into the body language of the peer reviewers, because if they are giving off that language, they shouldn't be. Basically, they're just writing down what you're saying, again, to corroborate the verbal evidence with what's been submitted in the report. So again, these are just some more examples, all things you're familiar with, our assessment processes, our GE process, obviously in our case, Core Plus. We should have intimate knowledge, particularly faculty that have served on curriculum committees, but all faculty should at least understand what the Core Plus is, how it feeds into the mission. Some more examples: professional development, faculty hiring processes. Again, this is all from the slides in the vector training. A few more examples. And what I would encourage you to do too is, while this is all clear evidence files that are already in there, we have that available to that committee, is when they're on campus and you're giving verbal testimony, yes, it corroborates what's in the physical evidence that's already been submitted, but you can go off script. you're going to have personal testimony that's going to differ from this evidence block that is something we might not have considered, particularly those things that are unique to UF. Feel free to give that evidence as testimony as well. And just some more examples. So what I want to do now is to get to a scenario. We're going to do a little mock scenario here where we're going to ask you questions. And again, try to treat this as if it was the real thing. You don't know us. We're going to ask you, please stand up, please introduce yourself, and we'll go from there. So let's go with this first question here at the top of the list. What is the philosophy? Yeah.
The whole process, there are 5 criteria. So we talked yesterday about mission. So we should know the mission statement and how we live that here at the university. Talked about integrity, so you should be familiar with our employee handbook as well as our faculty handbook because those questions come up. And then these next 2 are on teaching and learning, and then the assessment of that process, which really is the more focused on the academic portion, in my opinion. And so I think it's really important that you read through the argument and really, especially when your information is used as evidence, you're a chair or a chair of a committee, and make sure you can speak. All right? You don't have to know everything, although it should be something you are aware of, and you should participate in the sessions because as a group we know it all. But individually it may be more challenging, so your presence there is very helpful when questions may be posed to the group and then one of us knows the good answer for it. And then that triggers other people to say, yeah, I do that. I do remember. Yes, that is something.
So anyone in the audience want to speak to the first question? What is the philosophy upon which our general education program, Core Plus, is formed and designed?
Hi, I'm Dave Essinger. I'm a professor of English. I've been here since 2003. I also edit and run our literary magazine, Slippery Elm. And I've been on the Gen Ed committee for not all of those 20 years, but a lot of them. And a few years ago, we completely overhauled our Gen Ed system from a distributive model to an outcomes-based model. We went through a couple of years of process getting buy-in from faculty and community and all parties on what those outcomes need to be. So that's how we arrived at Core Plus, which is our current Gen Ed plan, which we also went through all of the careful steps to make sure that we were in compliance with ODHE and all of the OTM for Ohio Transfer module and all of these. And we have been growing that Gen Ed Core Plus system over the last few years. We believe that the current outcomes-based system is well meeting the needs of our students.
So if I could follow up with that question, and this doesn't necessarily have to be answered by you, you said we believe it's doing this. How do you know it's doing that? How do you assess this program?
Good question, thanks. Yeah, we have been working on Gen Ed assessment. So this goes a few different directions. So we assess this from a faculty direction as far as what are our students learning, what outcomes are being met, and we track that. And participation rates, we only implemented this Core Plus plan a couple of years ago, but participation rates are trending upward, and we're continually working on making sure that these courses are assessed. We've been working on further implementing exit interviews with students as far as what was meaningful to you, what did you gain, what did you learn from all parts of their UF experience, but specifically Gen Ed Core Plus classes. So those are some of the ways that we assess how we're meeting those outcomes.
Explain to me the process on that assessment of the Core Plus. So how do you gather data, write a report, who's it distributed to?
Kim Majeski, Chair of the Department of Communication and Director of Basic Speech Course Programs here. That process really begins in the application process of having a course enter into its particular Core Plus category. The process was initially designed by having shared rubrics for each of the Core Plus categories so that regardless of the course that the student is taking, everyone is assessed via the same rubric. And so by applying for the Core Plus program to the GE committee, you have to essentially establish how the course and the assessed activity is both relevant to the category and the particular activity is relevant to the rubric that is presented to it. Then as faculty, we work with the other faculty members within our department and those that teach that course to ensure that that particular activity is a part of the course. Students then complete that activity. That information is then submitted to a system called Task Stream. It's in that Task Stream system that we enter in our assessment of the success of that student's ability based on that shared rubric. That information is collected by the GE committee and redistributed to us at the beginning of each year so that we're then able to take that data that allows us to have not only the data from the courses that we're given, but the others that are in that category. We're then asked then to compare not only our success or the student's success in that category across our own course throughout the years, but also to others within that so that we can assess whether or not that particular course and activity are meeting the expectations we set here at the University of Findlay. And we're asked to then reflect upon how we can either maintain that level of improvement. We typically tend to set that at an acceptable rate of around 75%, an ideal rate at 90%. And if we aren't meeting those expectations, how can we adjust our teaching of the course to help that assessment ensure that we are meeting the objectives of that Core Plus activity? And if we are meeting them, how can we ensure that we can maintain that success?
Thank you. Could I hear from one faculty member who is in that Core Plus and what they found and how they changed their teaching due to that process?
Todd Beitzel, Professor of Criminal Justice and the Chair of the Justice Sciences Department. So in my juvenile delinquency class, they have to do a theoretical assessment of a juvenile offender, essentially trying to identify why that offender may have committed the crimes they've committed and utilizing theory to try to explain why they might have committed those crimes. One thing I was discovering is that students were struggling in applying the theories in the explanation part. And that kept happening a couple of years repeatedly. So what I decided to do was to invoke a mandatory draft of the paper that was both reviewed by their peers and by me, and offered some suggestions on how those theories might be applied more effectively in explaining that delinquent's behavior. So that was one modification I made, was simply adding a mandatory draft of the assignment instead of just having them submit a final product and sort of leaving it to chance as to whether they were effective or not effective. But that definitely came out of my assessment of the GE, that they were doing a good job of identifying the theories, but then they were having trouble connecting the theories to the details of the juvenile offender in that project.
Did it make a difference?
It made a big difference, yeah. I started to see the application of theory scores go up by as much as 20%.
So pivot a little bit, we're going to pop around with some of these questions here. If a student expresses an intent to leave UF, let's say they come to the advisor's office, many of you are advisors, and they tell you this is a faculty member. What are some of the processes that take place with that student?
Hi, Bill Johnston, Director of Student Persistence. I work out of the Euler Success Center. So we utilize a system on campus called Starfish. It's an early alert warning system. And so the ask would be that faculty, staff, or a student themselves can actually raise a flag that indicates their intent to transfer, withdraw, or leave UF. that flag automatically sends the student instructions on how to complete the withdrawal process in Workday, but it also has instructions on the refund schedule and how refund would or wouldn't be applied to their situation. It has instructions on financial aid implications that could happen if they make that decision. And then it also has a link to schedule with either myself or my student persistence coordinator so that we can talk them through their options, their opportunities, and any possibilities that could come from them making that decision.
Can you tell me a little bit about the participation rates with the starfish you said?
So participation rates, we have about 250 faculty, staff, students who actively use Starfish each semester. We get upwards of 10,000 notification raised per semester, be it flags, kudos, to-dos, referrals. Let's see, we just finished one of our midterm survey progress surveys that had a 78% completion rate among all faculty. Yeah.
I'd like to hear from a faculty member who's not yet spoken. Tell me how using the starfish in that early identification helps retain a student. And the comment I would like to hear from a faculty member who has not yet spoken is often used.
Hi, Dr. Kim Litchfeld, Chair of Environmental Science and Occupational Health. And so I use Starfish personally to identify students who are doing well in the course. Students who are active in the course, I give kudos to because that really also helps with retention because it shows, one, that we're paying attention to what they're doing in the classroom, not only they're doing bad or, struggling, but how well they're doing. And those kudos not only go to their advisors, but if they're athletes, they also go to their coaches. And so sometimes that helps them also with not having to do lots of laps. But when we have things like when we're starfishing students and we're saying that they're struggling or that, their attitudes have changed, something has changed with that student, or they might need extra help. If it's something like that, then counseling center may reach out to them. It may be academic support reaching out to them. But it shows that we as faculty and as a community as a whole, that we actually care about those students and we want to keep them and we want to see them do well. And I've seen that where students were like, thank you so much. I had an appointment, or I'm going to go to tutoring, or I'm going to the review sessions, or can we meet for office hours? So that's really how I use Starfish and how I've seen the success with retaining of our students.
Let's pivot to some new questions. Let's take a look at the first question up there. Intellectual inquiry, acquisition, application, integration of knowledge are important components of liberal arts education. Give me some examples of how UF incorporates intellectual inquiry into curriculum.
Chris Ward, College of Business, full professor. An example of inquiry is taking something and aligning it with what we do, like diversity. And so students in a consumer behavior class had to go in and do a project following design thinking and look at something that was a disability, let's say hearing impaired, and they had to do research on products and other services surrounding that so that they could dig deeper into understanding the particular maybe issues associated that parents may have with someone like on the autism spectrum. So it not only taught them language instead of someone saying they were autistic, the correct language is autism spectrum. It taught them products and services and other things that could be barriers to that child being included in certain either school or other activities. So it gave them an appreciation of what it means and an understanding of different individuals.
Thank you. That sounds like experiential learning is what I'm hearing.
I viewed it as intellectual inquiry because they didn't actually apply it. It was more the research that they did to see products, for example, the same product was more expensive when it was labeled for an autistic child. And that realization and the amount of, the one group even researched the fact that how much it cost that parent because they couldn't do some other things, how much it cost that parent and lost wages because they had an autistic child.
Thank you. I have some more examples from other faculty members.
I'm Diana Montague, a professor of communication. I've been here since 1986, so I've seen a few of these go through. In our public speaking course, which is mainly first year and second year students, one of the speeches assignments that we have is called the workplace communication speech. And this is designed to get them to not only research communication challenges in their given field or the field they think they want to go into. They're required to interview at least 2 professionals in the field they think they want to go into. And so they are asking about what are communication challenges in this area. So we really try to get them to get examples of and hear that it's not just the content that you're learning for your major, it is being able to communicate with other people, not only on the content of your major, but just that interpersonal communication, the organizational structure, your communicating with colleagues, superiors, clients, patients, and that all, those are critical skills to know ahead of time while you're still learning your content area. So we have found that to be a very useful assignment for them to learn not only a little bit more about some of the complexities in their areas, but it's also actually led to some other opportunities of experiential learning potentially with either shadow opportunities or some have even had internship offers after those interviews.
Thank you.
How do you ensure that the faculty in your program are appropriately qualified and stay up to date on to teach the courses that they are assigned?
Lucas Gross, instructor of nuclear medicine and technology. For our program specifically, we need to make sure that they remain current with their board certifications in one of the 2 credentialing bodies that are nationally recognized, and they also stay up to date with our accreditation body for our nuclear medicine program, the Joint Commission on Nuclear Medicine Technology.
Very good, thank you. How about a program that does not have a professional accrediting body?
Hi, I'm Robert Postic. I'm the chair of the Department of Behavioral Sciences and full professor of political science. One of the things that I think ensures this is that faculty are evaluated on a number of different measures every year. One of them is high quality professional development. Within that, faculty are required to basically report the professional development that they did the previous year. As the chair of a department, what I look for is not just that they list what they did, but how are they connecting that to their teaching? I did X, and this is how it's showing up in my teaching. So I think that's one of the key ways that we ensure that at the program level.
I realize that we're coming up on time here, so I think we probably want to both reflect and offer an opportunity for you to ask us questions as peer reviewers about the process and what you can expect. So, open floor there.
Well, one, I thought the answers were great.
Yes.
Once again, those are really good answers, and I hope that while you're sitting here and you hear those answers, you're like, oh, of course, we have faculty development, we have that whole process. That should have been, absolutely, this is how we stay current, this is how we utilize it. So I thought that was great, and I think too it reflects that when you are here as a group with the Higher Learning Commission, we all know bits and pieces that really then trigger that memory in mind. Two, I am very nodding and thank you. Yes, that doesn't mean I agree with you. That doesn't mean it was clear. Because as a reviewer, I am only here to verify information, not to say you're great, like you're going to get accredited. I don't know that because I don't make the accreditation. I'm just coming here to verify information. So the response of the reviewer is really not, it's kind of different. Like if I say, what are you talking about? Because I don't kind of understand that star thing to do. I'm just supposed to be listening, thanking you, and hearing what you have to say, recording it to see if it's verified. We also asked several different people. We asked about the philosophy of the core education. I would also ask another group the same question. So I want to hear, is that something you actually do know, or is it just something one person reported? So there is a repeat in these group meetings of similar questions to actually verify that what we have reported in your current argument is true.
Yeah, and I would, just because 3 and 4 are really teaching-centric criteria, it doesn't mean that we're not going to have staff too. We don't know who those folks are. We'll say, as Mark was kind of directing on from somebody else, let's hear from the staff member now. And that would be the opportunity for evidence faculty development to speak about the CTE, for example. There's plenty of examples of evidence that don't just have to come from chairs and directors. You may know, again, some things that are anecdotal that you're doing, and you can speak to those. Those might not be even before. Remember those slides, those lists, they're exhaustive. So if you had a chance to just look at all the links, there's just hundreds of bits of evidence in there. So again, there's a chance to go off script and to give more detail of something you feel might not be in that article. These are the peer reviewers that are coming to see us. If you want, as I said to the group yesterday, feel free to Google them. They are real people. What you'll notice is that the peer reviewers that visit us are similar to us in the sense they come from similar institutions. Mostly private, mostly religiously affiliated, in the ballpark of on the low end, maybe 2,000, on the high end, 6,000, similar programs and whatnot. So they're very similar folks from a variety of backgrounds. You see here there's some upper administration, some faculty, some staff. You'll have 5 folks. The federal compliance reviewer doesn't come on campus. I'm just putting that up there because they have a separate role that they do off-site. In fact, they're currently doing it, I think, or just completing that process. So you won't see the federal compliance reviewer, but the rest of the top 5 individuals, you will see them on campus. So feel free to, but again, that's in the vector training as well.
Can I offer an observation? Compared to yesterday, the fundamental difference between the responses to the question today and yesterday was that some of you were here yesterday or in the meeting yesterday. You spoke from your experience and your knowledge of it individually, right? So the most important thing to remember is to be candid and honest, but also to speak from your experience aligned with the assurance argument. The case that we're making, if you have experience that rings true with that, share it. There's no reason that you can't speak about it in your own specific way, and it contributes to the larger picture. And I think that that's both the questions that Mark and Ron were asking were kind of pushing you in that direction, but the answers were much more forthright and straightforward today. Yesterday, everybody was a little freaked out, like, is it a test? Is it a quiz? Whatever. It isn't. It is really just, what is your experience? Can you speak to this? And do that from your own knowledge base, but again, also with your understanding of the argument, of the materials that we've put forward. And I think in that respect, we'll be fine. Because I actually believe we do practice what we say we do, and that, we're cognizant of those things. But, it's easy to forget all the little nuances and details, but in the larger picture of many answers, the site team will get the information, that they need.
One other observation too is, again, because this is mostly faculty in the room today, is, a couple things you stop Kim when she was ready to give a second. We will do that. We did that yesterday. Good enough. Thank you. We'd like to meet someone else. But we're also going to try to mix things up, which I noticed you did when we talked about assessment. Those of you that don't have a professional organization that does some sort of assessment. The other thing I would notice is if we have faculty all in one group answering, so if it's only humanities folks or only sciences folks, especially in an institution like this that's heavy in health professionals, and say, well, what about some practice folks? Those of you that have practical applications for pre-professional programs, if you will. Tell us about your processes. So we'll pivot, kind of gather the tenor of the room, who's answering what, and pivot from that.
Also, when the reviewers are here, they're on a schedule, so they only have a certain amount of time, maybe 30 minutes or an hour, and that's why I'll ask a question, and I want to hear an answer, and then if you digress or get on to something else that's not pertaining to the question, I don't interrupt, because I'm on a time frame. So I may interrupt you, because I understand that somebody else has to add, information to that helps me understand it better. So I think that's important too. They're not being rude. They have only so much time to verify the information.
So again, open for questions. Yes, Landon.
How much of our sort of internal jargon should we assume they know? Like when starfish came up, there was talk of kudos, flags.
Yeah.
Now, we all know what that means. Will they know what a starfish flag versus a starfish kudos is? Will they know what our C1 outcome versus C2 or O1 or O2? Will they have reviewed to that extent, or should we try to insert little bits of explanation?
Yeah, I think the short answer is you can use parenthetical asides to explain something, certainly like that. But you'll notice in my response, I think I said, what is that star thing or something like that? They'll ask you, again, can you explain what that is? They'll pick up on that.
And when I do a review, I typically do 3 or 4, and so they'll give me criteria 3. So I have a whole month to go through it. So they are well versed in the language and what you are doing, and if they're not, they will ask.
Yeah, and again, so much of this is the assurance argument that's already in the system and they're reviewing, to your point. They've read that. So what's locked in now with the narrative and the evidence, that's, again, 90% of the review.
And they look at our web page, and anything that's public, they get on there and look for things as well. So, and basically when I do this, I come with all my questions already written down. I know what I need to ask to make further clarifications because the assurance argument might have brought this to my mind. And I do hear, in my experience, on faculty qualifications and staying current with teaching. That's a common one. And how do you assess student learning in your program, especially when you do not have that professional external accreditation? That's a common question I have heard too.
And we have those systems in place. Again, just a caveat with one of the bullets up here, you notice in the italices, stick to the evidence. Obviously, I want you to confer, as it says, with your chairs and directors, if you're not one yourself, to find out what was submitted. If you feel you didn't have a hand in that process, at least know what your department submitted as evidence so you're aware of it. But it doesn't mean that you have to, again, and I say stick to that, it's nice to know that and be aware of that is what that means. You can certainly, again, go off script if you have other evidence that you think would support the argument.
Yeah, we use the criminal justice, your presentation on how you do the assessment feedback, did we use that as evidence? I don't know if it's in the argument. Is it in the argument, your example?
I submitted it, whether it may, I haven't read the entire.
It should be in there.
And say it wasn't though, that's still, like, that's a justification of somebody else is doing it, that's not actually in the evidence, let's say. That's a good example of that, just reinforces to me, they do have this process.
Okay, shut it up now. Questions? Yes, tell me your name.
Tom Niedler, I'm instructor of teaching biology. I teach mostly anatomy and physiology, but I've been in higher education for 30 plus years, and I've seen many accreditation visits. In the past, at other institutions, we were told that they may ask for a specific faculty member or class. Are they still doing that? And then they come and visit the class?
Again, it's right now we submitted the argument. They are asking for additional clarification of different pieces of information. And I have asked to meet with a certain committee if what was being reported to me wasn't, like I wasn't getting the answer, I wasn't clear on it. So I do believe that that latitude to say, well, I would like to talk to this committee. And then, have that meeting, just to ask for clarification and
typically when I've asked, we were talking about this process, and they just want to meet with that committee. Or if I meet with the group and nobody's here on that committee or speak to it, then I can also ask. I don't know. I've had done that a few times.
You had mentioned a course though, visiting like again, this is just my experience. 6 reviews, never asked to see a course. They try to be not disruptive to the environment, right? They understand that the school is operational. Unless you're visiting on a break, there's going to be people doing things. So they'll come in sessions, they'll leave in sessions. Again, with 3 and 4, what I'm looking for typically, I almost always review 3 and 4. I'm going to be going to the provost's office and I'm going to go through faculty files to see if they match with what's put up on the website, to see if people actually have the degree they say they have. Those kind of things I'm going to be looking for. I probably would not ever ask or get into the nuance of a specific course, but I might want to have somebody who is a director or chair of the program in the room that can speak to the courses holistically.
Yeah, this is, HLC is an institutional, so they don't go like, so that's your point. I've never been asked to see a class because there would be no information about the whole institution in that one class. That's like when they talk about assessment, I'm sure we all assess our students, but that's in the classroom. I'm talking about assessment as an institution, as a department. How do we do assessment of student learning on that scale?
Other questions?
This is a question I've been asked. In the open forums on the criteria that the site team will hold, what is the role of administrators in those meetings? Should they attend? Should they not attend? In other words, evil people like me, should we come? Stay quiet? What's the general practice on that?
It depends upon the meeting. So there's certain meetings where the review committee, the chair specifically, will tell the institution in advance who can be in there and who can't. So a good example I think I brought up yesterday is the board of trustees. Typically the review committee wants to meet with the board separately. Obviously they don't want the president in the room because they want honest feedback. And it would be the same thing. If it's a faculty forum and it says it's a faculty forum, then no administrators would be in the room. Usually the chair is going to notify us in advance of the requirements. Verbal testimony that corroborates or backs up the evidence that was submitted with the assurance argument. We're just here, as Mark said, to verify. So, all right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for coming. So thanks for coming today. I'm assuming that everyone has taken a look at those slides in Vector. I think they came across through Vector. How many of you have already looked at those? Show of hands. The majority of folks, if you haven't done that, that would be where I would say to go. So some of the faces in the room are familiar from other sessions we've had, and if you raise your hands to the slide, you can see are familiar as well. But I do want to kind of kick things off with a bit of an introduction here to the process, particularly if you're a staff member that's come from outside of academia and you know nothing at all about accreditation, or you're a brand new faculty member and maybe you don't have a professional organization in your discipline that does some form of accreditation. This might be totally new to you, so I'm going to kind of just quickly set the stage with that in mind. So again, these are from the slides that I had in Vector. What is accreditation? That top statement is a good summary. Voluntary activity initiated by the institution requires rigorous self-evaluation and independent objective peer appraisal of the overall quality of the institution. So the majority of the process that we submit, and the majority of the time the peer reviewers spend, is reviewing the assurance argument and the documents that we submitted. Kudos to Sarah Hinkson for writing a fantastic assurance argument. And putting together that giant compendium of evidence and renaming all the files. That's like 90% of the work. So when the peer reviewers, and again, I'll put the list up on the last slide that was also up in the slide we put on Vector Solutions, you'll see the peer reviewers, who they are and the institutions they come from. About 10% of their job, of our job in visiting an institution, is just corroborating the evidence that's in the file. We look at it, we're verifying what was produced, we're verifying the statements that were made in response to the questions on the 5 criteria. And we're also looking for maybe things that weren't in those evidence files as well. And that would come with the individual testimony. Maybe you have something unique to add that we didn't find in the evidence files, or maybe it's just something that you thought was unique about the institution that you wanted to add. So that's a nutshell of what accreditation is. If you didn't know where the Higher Learning Commission is, there are 7 bodies in the US. HLC is the largest, second largest is SACS, which does the Southern schools. And then there's a lot of small little regional ones. And when we talk about HLC, again, we talk about a global or 8-mile view of the institution, looking at all processes from fiduciary responsibilities to living up to the mission, to assessing and continuous improvement of the institution. So again, this is a reaffirmation of our 10-year review. So it is something that we've had accreditation by HLC since 1962. And there is a midpoint review, which for us took place in 2017, is that right? And of course, there'll be another one coming up in 4 to 5 years, should we get reaccredited. But again, if you wanted to know a little bit about HLC, there it is, or you can always go to hlc.org as well. So basically, the value of it is we don't run very well as an institution if we don't have it. No student, no parent, no employer, I think, would take us very seriously if we didn't have peers from other institutions looking at us and saying, are you staying true to the mission? So all of these things that you see under the importance of accreditation line up with this. They all go back to the mission. Are you doing the things that you say you do? Do you have qualified people in roles in both student support, academic services, and all the other functions of the institution? And that's part of the process. So the value is self-apparent in the sense that if you don't have it, you can't get federal financial aid. Students and parents aren't going to take you seriously. Those in the professions are going to look at you with a skeptical eye. So that is a brief definition again of the value. These are examples, all these bullet points are examples of evidence that we have submitted already. So they are there for our assurance argument. It is all the stuff that you submitted to Sarah, and then she put together as evidence files to back up the assurance argument she wrote. So none of these should be surprising to you. What I would encourage you to do, if you haven't already done this, and you'll see this probably on a future slide, is if you're unsure of your chair, your director, your direct report, what they submit is just ask, what did you submit to Sarah for evidence files? And just at least on the surface understand those. You should, of course, have a very intimate understanding of the processes within your areas already. That's your job. You do that on a day-to-day basis. So you should understand those things. But in terms of the actual evidence files, you'll definitely want to consult with your chair, your director, or your direct report.
You may also want to review the employee handbook so you're aware, just to remember what's in that document as well. And I'm Mark Bernard, by the way.
Yeah, I guess I assumed everybody probably knew me, but
yeah. Nice to meet you.
And because we're filming this, that's why I'm using it too. So these are some questions that peer reviewers might ask, and the way we'd like to lead the session from here, and there'll be time for you all to ask questions of us afterwards, is to treat this like a true mock session. So one of the things that we're going to do is, when we ask for responses, is you will tell us, obviously, your name, your position, and then any other roles that you feel are pertinent to answering the question. For example, in criterions 3 and 4, if you were the chair of the assessment committee, whether it's GE or global assessment or whatever, I would expect you to tell us that so we at least have an understanding of what your role is in that process. So I think we'll just start with that first kind of global question. And I'm a peer reviewer. I don't know anything about UF except what I read in your assurance argument and looked at in your files. So how do I know? I saw the evidence there, and now I'm asking you. How do I know if you're successful in accomplishing your mission?
David Osborne, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of Findlay. Well, our mission is to equip students for meaningful lives and productive careers. And one of the ways that we know if we're successful or not is to survey those students upon graduation and find out if they're employed in their field. We find out a lot of other information that way through that survey as well through our Center for Career and Professional Development. And we also collect a lot of information from our area businesses where we have students placed as interns. Provides tremendous feedback on areas where we can kind of shape our program a little bit more to make them even more successful in the workplace.
Thank you. Anybody want to add to that? You might work out steps today.
My name is Deborah Parker. I'm dean for the College of Pharmacy. Another way that we do that is by licensure examinations. We can assess how well we've prepared our students to enter into their chosen career. The pharmacy program does that, and virtually all the health professions, college education. There's many examples of that on our campus, but we do track that very closely and how we compare to our peers and the country.
Okay, so we heard from somebody almost at the cabinet level. We heard from a dean. How about some faculty or staff?
Lucas Gross, faculty member in the Degree of Medicine Technology program. The programs themselves have their own accreditation bodies that they have to meet the standards, and they have to do midpoint reviews. Standards that higher education has to go through their process. And those standards are followed very, very closely. If they don't meet certain standards, then they're put on probation or remediation plan to ensure that everybody is bringing up to the national standards.
Do they have to pass a national licensure exam?
Yes, they have to pass one of 2 board examinations.
How about an area that maybe doesn't have a professional body outside accreditor? Someone speak to that. I mean, it could be student services, it could be staff, it could be faculty.
Being successful in your mission is a university-wide endeavor. It's not an academic one.
So maybe we want to call out some particular areas, see if there's anybody in the audience. Typically, if it gets to a lull like this, that would be something I would do. So I'm just going to pick on ITS. Anybody here from ITS?
Anybody here from ITS will be willing to recognize?
Steve Clymer from ITS. The way that I think I would judge whether you're performing successfully is whether you get students to come back, or your enrollment stays high, or they don't leave. That's how I would judge. As far as technology goes, we can check this to make sure that what we're doing is on par with other universities. I don't know any accreditation or anything that we're doing with that, but it's really easy to check to see what other people are doing.
What would be some of those things that you would check? And this doesn't necessarily just have to go to you. What would be some things that you would benchmark to? Would you look at other institutions' LMSs and their success rates with it? Or maybe going back to the service that you provide, would you look at how quickly you respond to customer requests from your stakeholders? Yes, sir. Tell me your name.
Ray McHale is VP of ITS, and every 2 years we administer a survey along with Schaefer Library that measures services in ITS library services. And one of the results of the survey is the ability to benchmark that against the other institutions that are involved in the survey. So we do what Steve suggesting. Also, we keep monthly dashboards, metrics of things such as uptime for all of our critical systems on campus, like the LMS and the ERP.
Thank you. For ITS, do you have policies, specific policies or procedures in place that you follow to help facilitate student success, like help desk or timeliness of responses or management of the when you use Canvas system? Do you have any of those?
Yeah, we do have policies and procedures both within IT, but also within the student community as well as faculty and staff. Lays out things like best practices, but it also lays out rules surrounding this is what you can use our facilities for, this is what you can use our equipment on the network for, and that does things like provide protections for students and faculty staff to do things like keep
data and all of those things protected, but it also helps to facilitate the student experience to make sure that they're having, the best opportunity they can.
Name and position.
I'm Dan Haas, I'm the director of UISD.
Thanks.
Okay, let's pivot away from ITS. Let's get some responses from some other areas.
So, human resources, one way to equip our students and the mission would be our daily contact with the students in HR, helping them navigate the workday system, getting I-9s done, making sure all the documents are qualified, and we deal with students every day, so it's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Others?
Absolutely. So this is just an aside. This is why we circulate the slides and ask that you look at them carefully and reflect on, because these are the evidentiary points that are in the assurance argument and that Sarah put evidence for. So if you recognize yourself in any of those, then you should be able to say, well, in terms of diversity, that's an important part of our mission, and here's how I'm part of this group, and this is what we're working on. Remember, your personal experience connected to the talking points and the evidence are what's going to happen. There's no mystery here. They know the answers. They've looked at the argument and the evidence. So all of these things here are about institutional effectiveness, and institutional effectiveness is how we fulfill our mission. Okay? So connect the dots in that way, because a lot of the questions for this criterion aren't academic in nature, they're operational. They're about how do we as a whole institution function effectively. So you got to think about it in that way and relax a little bit, because all of you know some of this stuff, right? You're all like, so it's okay. Aside over.
And you don't have to answer necessarily in the vernacular. And if you do use vernacular, that's fine too. We'll ask if you don't understand acronyms that you use, etc. But yeah, again, think of that metaphor of the iceberg, right? 90% of what the peer reviewers do, they do before they get to campus. And that's the assurance argument. It's reading it thoroughly several times, going over the evidence files, opening them, seeing if they back up the argument made. So what we're here to do is just to verify that what was put in the assurance argument is accurate. And your verbal testimony just corroborates that. It may expand on it too. So let's move on from that question maybe. We sort of answered the fourth bullet point there indirectly. Let's see the next one here. We sort of touched on the first bullet point, but I think that's another good place to go to, right? We got some hints of that. How do you track overall institutional efficiency? What are some processes? Let's talk about process. What are some processes we have in place to do that? We've heard some of those already, but I want to hear some more.
Is anyone from the business office
And if you think we're bad, just wait till the reviewers here. Yes.
Julie Alford, AVP for County. I would say probably use their workday system, implementing the company a lot of efficiencies, assistance from auditors, having clean audits, and being able to see efficiencies with our institutions for them, interim controls. And I mean, we're also looked at by like S&P will every year given a rating, they have a lot of confidence to adhere to, just being in compliance with everything and showing that we're doing due diligence.
So to follow up on that question about workday then, you have statistics or something that kind of show you before and after, so that it shows that you moved the bar in certain processes that you mentioned?
I was just reading and I seen that we were able to reduce staff, in order to become more efficient with the workday process. So we have lots of FTE and we're more efficient in manual processes.
Okay, so hours of productivity went up. Okay.
The hours of productivity went up, but FTE numbers went down. Thank you, that was a good answer.
Yes.
Kim Williams, VP of Business Affairs and Treasurer of Board. I mean, from the workday perspective, we're able to have real-time data. It's transparent and available across campus. It allows all areas to be able to immediately go into their budgets, look at all their information. We're able to do monthly, daily dashboards. We track all of our financial efficiencies to make sure that we're staying within our strategic goals and making sure that we're keeping with our balanced budget and that we're being as fiscally and ethically responsible as we can be. And our workday system is certainly a major factor in allowing us to do that.
Thank you. I think we heard from Dr. Osborne a little bit about how external stakeholders assess if we're living up to the mission. But what about internally, things like retention? How do we know we're keeping our students here?
Hello, Liz Sable, Associate Vice President for Student Success in the Euler Success Center. We actually have a number of measures in place to look at student retention. We track them first year to second year, second to third, and so on and so forth. We also do cross comparisons so how is our year 1 to year 2 retention rates over a 5-year period. Drilling down even deeper, where are we looking at different student demographics in terms of this very particular program or this particular demographic of student, how are they being retained in different areas. Additionally, we have a number of institutional research projects going at one time, looking at not necessarily why they leave, but also why they stay. So really diving into what University of Findlay does well and how we can expand on that, because right now 76 of our first, second year students stay. Why are they staying? As well as, of course, understanding why that 24% does leave.
What are your benchmarks?
Benchmark score in terms of?
Internal, external, when you benchmarking, you look at other schools, national levels?
Yes. Insert yes here. So we are looking at local and regional and national levels. Working with the Department of Institutional Research, I have 17 peer institutions. I'm looking at what they're doing. So really benchmarking against those, using iPads for a lot of our data so I can be more data informed when I'm setting my measures. So looking at the 1% increase in student retention from year to year, starting in 22 and going to 26. What type of goal is that compared to our peer institutions?
Thank you.
Can you share some examples of your evaluation processes in your department?
Heather Ward, Vice President, Human Resources. So talking about Workday and how that has allowed us to create process efficiencies, we also use Workday for our staff evaluation process. So we are evaluating performance and productivity, making sure that goals that are inputted are aligned with our institutional strategic plan as well as our divisional strategic plan, and the measures of success and how we are accomplishing said goals. There are development plan processes that can be implemented as well, so we can aid in the development of our staff employees. With regards to faculty, there's a formal evaluation process that is also conducted. We are looking at ways to integrate that into the Workday system, but also evaluating performance and productivity based on the output, right? With tangible goals, things that can be measured, and then putting action items in place when we have fallen short of a goal, or if we have some barriers that have come up along the way that we can do to remove those barriers to achieve our goals.
Thank you. And once you do that evaluation report, I assume it's done annually for most of them?
Yes.
Okay, where does that information go?
So the information is housed in the employee's talent profile, which the employee has access to, and then through the hierarchy. So manager, and therefore all the way up a hierarchy has access to see that. If an individual would transfer departments or divisions, then their new manager would have access to see historical performance reviews, development plans, and improvement plans as well.
Thank you. Anyone else on an example of evaluation processes that you use in your department?
Sharon Crosby, assistant accounting. In our department, as far as myself, we keep all kinds of spreadsheets on any kind of evaluation we do as far as budgets. I look at if there's a budget amendment that comes through, I look at all those in comparison to where they are before anything is approved.
Do you develop a quarterly report or monthly report?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Daily reports. I look at the cash daily and always keep track of that and where we stand with that and always alert if there's any kind of issues and we keep track the expenses. We look at those on a monthly basis to see where we stand with kind of travel and expenses.
And you're comparing that to the budget or?
Monthly, just the travel expenses is with the monthly expenses that we look at to see if it, across the campus, if it's been going up or if somebody is spending more than what they should be here.
And is there an annual report of that spending process that goes up the ladder to help in the budgeting process for the university?
Absolutely. From what we do, then that goes up to Kid Williams, and she uses that to determine the budget from the overall campus on a yearly basis.
If we could hear from one more area maybe, or from human resources, business affairs. How about advancement? Are there any folks from advancement? We haven't heard from advancement. Go for some more chairs.
Thank you. I would say that some of the tracking the institutional efficiencies for us is that we look at national standards for fundraising as far as what a full-time fundraiser should be raising over a period of 18 to 24 months. We also look weekly at the annual giving that comes through our phone campaigns and tracking the mail campaigns and different things there according to percentages of responses, positive, negative, dollars in the door, what the size of those gifts are over a period of time compared to last year this time, and also national standards that come through for our fundraising.
Who are you?
Ken McIntyre, University of Kansas.
May I ask you just another question on that too? You have, obviously we read in the evidence that you have a target for your endowment.
Correct.
How's that work? How's that process?
So we're in a campaign. We have a target for our overall campaign. We'll be fundraising hopefully in the next 3 years to reach that goal of 75 million. We're at 54 million, which is what, 71.9% or so 71.8% of the goal. Somebody over here that does math is going to correct me and say. And then so that isn't just for the endowment piece alone, but that's for the overarching campaign priorities. So we have a set of priorities set by the trustees and the president that came up through the institution that we are seeking to fully fund all of these different areas that will help catapult the university into the future. Having the additional resources that can't be obtained through tuition and other grants. So.
Let's pivot a bit from a question that maybe is not on here because we're getting into the processes pretty thick here. So those processes and the evidence that you find should indicate where your strengths and where your challenges are. And I'm not, again, as my colleague said, we're not looking here for, oh, this is where we're really bad or anything like that. But where are your pinch points? I mean, really 8-mile point of view from your perspective in your departments. Where are the pinch points and where are the successes? And how does the data reveal that? What are you doing well? Again, go back to the mission. Equip students for meaningful, live, and productive careers. What is the evidence telling you? What do you do well and where are the challenges?
Hi, Bill Johnston, Director of Student Persistence out of the Oyler Success Center. So one thing that I think that we do very well is support our students. If you look across all student affairs, the different ways that we can support students from counseling services to health services to the initiatives that we do out of the Oiler Success Center to help students that are struggling on a day-to-day basis. We're in the thick of it right now, class day withdrawals next week. So meeting with students, helping them come up with game plans. And I think for an institution our size, we do a great job of supporting every student, utilizing systems like Starfish that we have that can get us that information so that we can act upon it and put in plans and put things in place to assist our students being successful.
And does this, you said Starfish, is it?
Starfish.
Yeah, does that integrate with other platforms on campus?
It does. So data comes out of Workday and goes into Starfish. Also, data comes out of ARMS, which is our athletic software, that goes into Workday, that then goes into Starfish. And then Starfish can also sync with Outlook calendars for appointments and relaying information back and forth. So for example, I use it every day. I have both my meetings I meet with faculty, staff, and other people on campus, and then also my student meetings. And they don't overlap because those two systems work together and talk to each other. And it makes it really easy to have a nice efficient day and be able to make meetings like this when students are scheduling everything every hour.
So that was student services. Let's hear from at least two more folks, and then we'll open it up for questions. Two different areas. Yeah. And you are from?
Brandon Heddergren, IT. I think one of the things we do really well is building technology and building systems that are resilient, but also configurable in the fact that we have many systems here when COVID hit, that we did not have technology holding us back to do remote learning, remote teaching, and employees being remote. And as we've been able to transform and bring on online programs, our technology has not needed to change. We've been able to use the systems that we have. So I think that's one of our strengths here, is we've been able to have the vision and the foresight to put the right systems in place that has continued to support our evolving goals. And of course, our challenge in technology is always money.
Hi, I'm Beth Stewart, also from IT. And I think another thing that ITS does really well, most offices on campus employ student workers. We have several areas in our department that we rely on student workers to help us out, and they do a fantastic job. And I think it's evidenced on how well they do by several of them are now full-time employees in our department.
What are you working on in IT? Where do you find the need to grow in IT?
Ray McCallum's IT. Something that's published annually is the EDUCAUSE top 10 issues in IT, and we review those as a leadership group in IT, and it's amazing how much what's on that list syncs up with what our challenges and opportunities are too. For example, every IT area, whether it's higher ed or business industry, needs to get better at cybersecurity. So it's certainly something that we need to do, not just on the back end, but more importantly, educating folks so that they can identify risks much more easily. And we've begun implementing a platform called Know Before to help with that endeavor. So that's just one area where we certainly need to grow and progress.
Thank you. Maybe one more response from one different area that we haven't heard from yet. Again, holistically, how are you living the mission?
Ben Taylor, AVP Facility Services. On our end, we are in a daily battle with creature comfort with faculty, staff, and students on campus here. In the past year, we have implemented Freshdesk as a mobile reporting and tracking system that has been instrumental for us to try and speed up response times as far as trying to keep everybody in this room and all different departments as comfortable as possible, as soon as possible. So that's been good for us. It's very easy on a daily basis to be overwhelmed with, it turns out to be 4,000 or 5,000 workers that come into us for a year to try and decipher, to get through those, try to get out of the weeds and try and put some analytics behind some of that. And what are our response times? How are we doing? Are we closing more orders out? Are we responsible on our end? And are we satisfying the needs of all the people in this room as well as our students? So fresh desk has been very key for us and everything. So we're kind of falling down before with an older system that let us see a lot of things, but not be able to track on things. So better process. Thank you.
I'm new to the university, and I've been here a year, but I've been a higher learning commission peer reviewer for a number of years. So this is how it works. I mean, I work with you and ask you questions to help verify what's said in the argument. Yes.
Typically, would we be placed in a criteria that probably we would not have contributed to, or because how I would probably answer some of those questions, I'm trying to think in terms of a position at the library, whereas I would have contributed more toward other criterias where I would feel much more comfortable responding to those because I provided evidence for those. So would I be placed on, or how would they?
Well, they have open forums now where they invite all people to come. And I don't know if because I always would do a selected group because I would want to see a select group of people like the library if I was reading the argument and I wasn't quite clear on what you were doing. But I was surprised. You could have spoken up on the mission. I'm like, they do a great job. Supporting student success. I was going to call you out, but I didn't.
Yeah, the open sessions, anyone can go to the open sessions. Again, the sessions are divvied up by 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and 5 of institutional priorities. So certainly anybody's welcome to go to those, but you would want to look to those open sessions to see where your best fit is. So in your case, you kind of just articulated that criterion 1 and 2 might be a better fit for you to attend. But this is something to discuss with your direct reports too, and to see if they feel is the best use of your time. Yeah, there will be closed sessions where you will kind of dictate, we, the peer reviewers, will dictate who's going to be in those sessions. But the open sessions are different. That's up to the institution, and encouragement from the cabinet of who should be at those meetings. Obviously, directors, chairs, deans, anybody in a position where they are leading or managing people should probably be in those sessions. But looking at what the criteria is and what do you think is most apropos to what you do.
Something I would just add in terms of the people in this room, you're at all different levels of the organization, right? Charlotte's working with students on a daily basis out front. Kim is running the entire business affairs division. Charlotte isn't expected to know everything about everything that's going on in business affairs. It's know your thing. So I thought actually Ben's answer was excellent because it really spoke to effectiveness, something they were doing in facilities to improve effectiveness. And I'll bet you have half a dozen things you could say in the library that you've done to improve your effectiveness. And that's, I think part of it is recognizing that you're not all going to know all of the really sophisticated is not the word, the 30,000-foot view on things, right? But you do know what you're doing on a daily basis, and so you think about it from that perspective. Well, what am I doing to make things work better? And then, maybe the various units in the room here, business affairs, HR, facilities, whatever, before they all come, spend a little time together just sharing your ideas about that, right? And I think you'll feel better going into it. This reminds me a little of the first session where everybody was really freaked out, but I mean, that's just my observation.
I think holistically, I think the answers were very good. When you start to get to specifics, again, you mentioned Ben's response, but certainly the IT responses, you can always rely on specific programs and platforms and kind of an ethos that is going to be familiar to other institutions. Anybody that works in the IT space is going to hear some of those commonalities. But same with student services, business affairs, business similar language, advancement, that folks are going to know. If you look at the review team that's coming up there on the slide, Those are folks from very similar institutions to ours. Most of them, student population is a little bit larger, except for one, Andrews is a little bit smaller than us, but they're very similar. They're private institutions that are historically or still religiously affiliated. So they have commonalities. If you look at the group that's coming, there's faculty in there, there's staff in there, there's a cabinet member in there. So it's a variety of folks that have seen similar situations to what we encounter. When I think of reaffirmation, I think of it as being reaffirming for you too. Beyond the process of going through this accreditation, it's bringing us back to that mission, right? We get bogged down in the minutia in the day-to-day, but then bringing it back to the 8-mile view, I think, is healthy. Not just for this process, but for what we do, and say, oh yeah, I'm serving the mission. This is why we're here. So I always try to think of it in that, and to kind of go from that 8-mile into the intricacies. Of course, if we're going to ask for processes, we want a specific targeted answer. But when it gets to that 8-mile view, what are you doing on a daily basis? You come to work. Charlotte, like Darren mentioned, you interact with dozens, maybe hundreds of students on a day-to-day basis. So you're part of that customer service front every day. But we all have that, right? When you're going into the houses, you have internal stakeholders. Every house, every office you visit. How do you affect the mission there?
As a reviewer, I'm on a team, and so I typically am given either criteria 4 or 5, or 3 or 4 on teaching or assessment. And I will spend a whole month going through that criteria, okay, just that one. And I write my report before I go to the visit, and I have questions that I'm going to ask specific people. And so they come prepared to do that because this is a verification visit. This is not an accreditation visit. They're verifying what was in that assurance argument is true. Part of that process would be, and this happens, is you brought up starfish from the persistence office. Then in another meeting, I might ask IT, how do you interface with the starfish program you have? Okay, to make sure that what I'm hearing is true. And if a faculty member, tell me about how you use starfish in your academic department. Because it's kind of asking the same question again and again from different constituents to get the sense that, yeah, this is something that the university is doing. I also only have 30 minutes or an hour with you, and so I may cut you off if you have people who talk a lot and they talk a lot. You're like, okay, I got it. And if you are the person who's telling me everything, and then I ask another question, I will ask you not to speak, but ask somebody else who's outside of that department, or somebody else in the department but not you, just so, again, I get a sense of all the constituents of the university. Okay?
At all levels, too. I certainly want to hear from Darren, but I want to hear from all the staff members as well. I want to hear from everybody. Other questions?
I just want to state, too, this is our 4th meeting with the staff and faculty, and I am impressed with the answers. I think they're really good.
Yeah, and it's awkward because you know us, right? So we're trying to have a context that's not real. We know it's made up, it's mock. But to get in that mindset where the folks that are going to be in front of you don't know you at all, except through the assurance argument. So again, as Mark pointed out, when the questions are being asked, they probably read that. So they're just waiting to see that what you say verifies what they've read. So just some closing points up here. Again, it is a circle of continuous improvement. We hear that a lot. It's certainly common in business vernacular, but it's common in academia now too, right? This is not a process that stops. It's reaffirmation. So it's to think of it as a cycle. Again, I stated this at the beginning, just to reiterate, if you haven't talked with your director, chair, whoever your direct report is, about the evidence they submitted, it might be a good idea to have that conversation so you're just at least aware of the files that they submitted to Sarah. And yeah, stick to the evidence as it says in italics, but that doesn't mean that if you have something, again, unique, or you want to give us a little more in-depth testimony, that you can't do that. We want that. And we expect that. I mean, this is our first time of putting faces to the paper, the names that we read about. Now we're seeing you. So we want to hear about the specifics, but we also want to hear some of the nuance that you can share with us in that verbal testimony. And again, as I said, hopefully it's clear, is the mission drives everything we do. So it should always go back to that. There's a reason why HLC starts with that as criteria one. That's the overarching thing. What are we doing in our positions on a day-to-day basis that reinforces the mission?
And I would just recommend that you take some time and review the employee handbook so you know what's in it. Not to memorize, but okay, we do have these policies or procedures. Just with your department handbook or procedure manual, just to make sure you remember, because you forget what's in there. So this is like going on a date. You have to get prepared to, at least if you're asked a question, like, of course we have a policy on that area. Okay?
Any final questions? Still got a little bit of time. Again, the review itself, the majority of it takes place on that Monday when we're on campus. That's when the majority of meetings happen. And then through lunch, there will be some kind of closing meetings. Those are usually more selective in terms of who comes to those, but the open forums are mostly on that first Monday, October 30th. So if you can, again, mark your calendars and be ready for that day. And I, again, encourage you to attend, to your point, Rebecca, which ones are the most important? Which ones are the most, coordinate most of what we do in terms of affecting the mission.
And at the end of the site visit, there is no, like, you got accredited or anything like that. So thank you for being, welcoming us to the university, and thank you for being so candid with your suggestions. It really helped me to understand your assurance argument.
Yep.
Right? There's no like, you're in or you're out. Yeah.
I just want a lot of familiar faces from all the sessions. So if you came to all the sessions or more than one session, or even just this session, thank you for doing that. Thank you for looking at the assurance argument. I suspect that many of you will refresh your memory with it as we get closer to the date and paying attention, to those details. We have recorded these sessions. We did not let this be known in advance, but we are going to put them out and make them available so that you can review them again, because you just can't get enough of this, at least until October 30th and 31st. And we will also schedule kind of like just a 1-hour open session on Zoom that anybody can connect to. I would encourage sometime towards the end of next week, like right before we get started, I would encourage all the units to just kind of spend a little bit of time, have a staff meeting and get your ducks in a row, and any questions or concerns or thoughts you might have, bring them to that open session so that we can, just have some last minute dialogue and feel good going into that Monday and Tuesday. Because we have a very solid assurance argument, we have lots of evidence. We're not going to be perfect at everything. In fact, we might not be perfect at a lot of things, but we do a lot of things really well here, and we should feel good about that. And we shouldn't be afraid to let that show on that those day and a half-ish while those reviewers are here. So thanks everyone. Have a wonderful remainder of your afternoon. Thanks.